Are you tired of the same old style of AAA game? Indie games are the solution, but with literally thousands of them available right now, where do you even begin? I've spent the past 7 years looking at these, so here are some of my personal recommendations and what to avoid in popular genres to get you started off on the right foot. If you were looking to recapture some of the magic of the games from the 90s, look no further than Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, a throwback 2D action platformer that really is best in class. At the time and even now, Shovel Knight was seen to be paying tribute to the Mega Man series, only replacing Man with Knight. So instead of Wood Man and Quick Man, we now have Spectre Knight and King Knight instead. This is a lovingly handcrafted title where you play as the iconic Shovel Knight, the blue burrower who uses his shovel not only as a weapon, but to dig up gems as well, going on an epic quest to rescue his partner Shield Knight from the Tower of Fate and the Enchantress within. It's balanced very nicely in terms of challenge, with good writing and even progression systems that make it feel more like a modern title. This massive collection even includes 3 other fully fleshed out campaigns where you play as the villainous Knights of the Order of No Quarter, which themselves play very differently as compared to a hero, and thus even have a Smash Brothers-like multiplayer mode, so for the amount of stuff you are getting, this is a no-brainer. You might have heard of Hollow Knight since it is widely regarded to be the best indie game ever, much less best indie Metroidvania, which carries on the legacy of games like Symphony of the Night. But what if I were to tell you that this is not the title to get? Hollow Knight is definitely on the more challenging end of things, and for a beginner, you will die over and over and over again, which I don't think is a great way to discover the joy of this genre, so how about Gato Roboto instead? You play as a cat in a mech suit, attempting to save your owner after your ship crash lands on an alien planet. Yes, it is solely black and white in terms of visuals, but it does lean more towards the Super Metroid end of things, which you may be familiar with, plus you play as an adorable cat. It is short and sweet as well, giving you a taster of what you can expect in my favourite genre. While the big-name Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest have continued into the modern era, there's just something about the 16-bit era of games that is wonderful, not least of which since I grew up with these titles and do have a soft spot for them. So if you loved Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI, I will recommend Chain Echoes, a beautiful pixel art title that is a fairly recent release but got an excellent position in my Game of the Year list for 2022. In many ways, this is another throwback title, so it will push all those nostalgia buttons with the classic Warring Kingdoms backdrop and political intrigue. However, it is modernized in many ways, where the turn-based combat in particular feels snappy and does not waste your time, having fantastic characters, an interesting skill tree progression system, and of course, the presence of mechs. This has resulted in comparisons being drawn to Xenogears, where the mixture of tech and fantasy is great. Yep, we are going there. The 2D precision platformer is an age-old genre, with people often pointing to Celeste as the game in the genre, but I did find the controls of it to be a little too complex and fiddly, especially if you're just getting back into platformers. Yes, there are built-in accessibility options like giving you unlimited air dashes, which you can toggle on in the options, but it always felt like cheating to me and just didn't feel right, since I always want to experience the game as the developers intended, at least on the normal or equivalent difficulty level. As such, let me point to Electronic Super Joy instead, one with more straightforward controls while still retaining the element of challenge. The silhouetted look still looks fantastic, combined with an excellent electronic soundtrack, but in addition to the platforming, I do think that the highlight is the humour and writing, where you are on a quest to get your butt back from an evil wizard that stole it. Despite the lack of a rear end, you still have a ground pound butt stomp move to dispatch enemies, but killing enemies is not the point. It does have its share of unique new mechanics introduced as well, with plenty of room for speedrunning and such, so give this a go to ease back in. When it comes to top-down roguelites, a genre known for its difficulty and replayability with random generation, many people will point to The Binding of Isaac being one of the most popular games in the space for good reason. This game has biblical roots and is based on the developer's own experiences, both positive and negative with regards to religion, where Isaac's mum hears a message from God who asks her to kill her own son, where the terrified young boy escapes into the monster-filled basement of the house. It is pretty dark in terms of theme and is not the friendliest of titles, especially in terms of mechanics, so how does playing as a sexy demigod sound in place of a naked young boy who uses his tears as weapons? This is precisely the role that you are put into in Hades, where you play as Zagreus, Prince of the Underworld and son of Hades, having to fight through and escape his father's kingdom in order to reach the surface. Developer Supergiant Games is a legend in the indie game space, where all of their games are worth a play, but their latest and greatest is just so well put together. The action feels smooth, and you have a variety of weapons to choose from, each having different forms which play completely differently, and are also able to call upon the power of the Olympian gods to aid you in your escape. The writing and characters are excellent, with this game popularizing adding a proper narrative to this genre with plenty of upgrades that keeps the gameplay loop compelling. Yes, there is less randomization and variety in bosses, which is precisely why it is great for beginners, since you will feel like you can slowly learn and master the game, all rounded off with the excellent soundtrack, and as a bonus, there's a sequel in development, so play through the original before that comes out. In the 90s, the mascot platformer was something that people chased after, with classics like Banjo-Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro and Mario 64 leading the way. But the popularity has died down, and other than Mario, we don't really get these games anymore, so indie developers to the rescue with the excellent A Hat in Time. You play as Hat Kid, having to gather the timepieces, which are in-game collectibles, in order to get back home, which are conveniently scattered throughout the world. It has 4 mini open-world levels to explore, all having their own gimmick and platforming challenges, where it just feels great to play and is best in class for good reason.
The Farm Simulation RPG
is another classic genre that goes back to Harvest Moon, where the modern-day indie equivalent is the mega smash hit Stardew Valley, one that has spawned a dedicated community around it, with entire YouTube channels growing off the back of this title. I love Stardew Valley myself, but to address a common complaint, despite generally having a chill or relaxing vibe, there is combat in this game, and people sometimes feel the anxiety and stress of the passage of time, of too many things to do but not enough time, so may I recommend Littlewood instead. Relatively speaking, this is much more unknown as compared to Stardew, but it is even more on the relaxing end of things, primarily because time only passes in this game when you commit to an action. Yes, instead of the timer being in real time, it is linked to your stamina meter, so it takes a load off and you can actually wander around and talk to the townspeople with no penalty. It takes place in a world after a cataclysm and evil has been banished from the world, where you play as the amnesiac hero having to help rebuild. I really like the monster card collecting aspect as well, which combined with the wonderful pixel art and freeform decoration aspect, and you have yourself a very cozy title. Pure puzzle games are virtually non-existent in the AAA space, since there isn't a market to support the costs of running a large team, so indie games have the unique distinction of having some of the most mind-bending titles, case in point being Baba Is You. Your average regular game developer is pretty smart, but puzzle game developers are on another level, where this title requires you to move Baba the sheep to the flag in order to complete the puzzle. Sounds simple? Well, not when there are walls and lava blocking you, but the game cleverly reveals the rules of the level to you, where you can push these words around to rewrite the rules, making you feel so clever when you solve a puzzle and will stretch your mind. Next to the Metroidvania, the roguelite platformer is another tremendously popular genre, one that combines platforming action with the randomness and replayability of a roguelite, where the French title Dead Cells is probably top in class. This game has one of the most compelling gameplay loops and progression systems, as you're gaining currency and blueprints in every run, getting more unlocks and upgrades, which means that there's always something new to check out every time you play. The developer has also supported the game post-launch with a number of updates, both paid and free, which maybe leads to a little bit of overwhelm with just so much stuff. so I'll go back to Old Faithful in Rogue Legacy. This is the title that made me fall in love with indie games in the first place, with the variety of characters and their genetic traits is fun, with the family mansion upgrade tree being awesome as well, and while there is also a sequel, you can get the original at a much larger discount during sales, so I will start there first, and for more on my connection with this game, watch my video on my Game of the Year selections for 2022.